Howdy, everybody. I have been sick, but you know what? That doesn't mean I don't have homework. So I've got this chapter to read before class tomorrow. Let's see how fast we can get through it. Chica! How's it going? Are you still in Canada? Hi, Susan. Chica, so much has happened since we saw you last. We have missed you so much. Hey, Red. Is it time for us? You guys are missing the study streams, aren't you? This is like the last official one. Sorry, guys, I have to find a mouth lozenge. I'm back. Until Sunday? Oh, nice. I hope you're having a wonderful time and you're getting enough rest. I have been sick as can be. I'm still getting better. We had, all the monetization happened, Chica. We have memberships and everything. Look, Cat's green. Isn't it pretty? How you doing, Cat? It's good to see you. I haven't gotten your bracelet sent out yet, mostly because I haven't been out of the house. Yes, hip hip hooray on the monetization. It's so exciting. Now I have to figure out how to do the fourth wall, and it said that I can do fourth wall once I got to this level, but I can't figure out how to make that work, and I couldn't really dig into it more than I had. So wait a second, you guys. I need to do something that just occurred to me. You're packing and organizing? Shoot, I need to message this person. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Speaking Greek. Okay. Sorry, guys. There's this thing called Sniff Spot. And Sniff Spot is like Airbnb, but for yards for dogs to come play. Hi, Lisa. Oh, Red, that'll be nice to move back to your place. It's so nice of you to let the kids live in it. They grow fast, don't they, Chica? They grow so fast. They grow so fast. How old is she? – 12 years old. Oh, they grow really fast at that age. I think my daughter's grown 8 inches in the past 4 years. Something like that. Some huge amount. It's unbelievable how much they grow. Unbelievable how much they grow. Okay, guys, this chapter is on... Oh, wow. Yours are 5, 7, and 9. Those are nice ages. I love those ages. It's my favorite age. Though I'm also quite partial to 3-year-olds. Hugs to everyone indeed. Sorry, guys. Teens are tough. Big Chief, you're a 4-year-old? My favorite kind, Big Chief. MLH, how you doing, man? Y'all always surprise me coming in for the study streams. Makes me laugh. MLH, check out the new decor we've got around here. We've got it all decked out in green for the corner joint. It's pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting. MLH, I heard Aaron talking yesterday about how they need somebody who knows all the ins and outs of dealing with the cops in Denver. And I was like, don't we already have somebody who knows all the ins and outs of dealing with the cops in Denver? Isn't that MLH? I am doing better. I am doing better. The cough is better. Have you guys noticed? There's almost no cough. That's been pretty amazing. Now I'm going to cough because I've been talking, but the cough is better. I had my treatment this morning and that went really well. I am feeling much less dispersed. And much more, well, more coalesced, less dispersed. That is how I am feeling. And much less stress. So today was a good day. I'm still stressing about the end of the quarter, but that's just going to be the way it's going to be. I will figure it out. I will figure it out. Someone told you about that? Yeah. Well, I think there's only so much any one person can pay attention to, and I don't think he pays attention to the smaller streamers. But I was like, we've got that. We've got somebody in Denver like that. We've got a person in Denver like that. Yes, I'm very pleased about the treatment, Red. They don't call you the Batman of Denver for nothing. That is a great nickname to have, MLH. That is a great nickname to have. You and Ellie go way back, don't you? Somebody was asking me about this today, whose stream Ellie moderated, and the only one that came up off the top of my head was yours. Evie, you look so pretty in green. You guys just look amazing. I love seeing all the green. It's so cool. It's so cool. Okay. So this chapter is on valuing language, and we're going to do something a little different this week. We are gonna, yeah, I like it too, Kat. I like it too. You're gonna get another new vest? Man, didn't you just unveil one this week? I can't wait to see the new one. You just got a new one. You just got 2 new ones. I'm going to have to start buying shoes every time you buy a vest, MLH, but then my husband will probably have a problem with that. Okay, so this chapter, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to start with the summary and see if that helps at all. Black, brown, and black and yellow. Very nice. The man likes his vests, indeed. No, I like my handbags. I got a new handbag. You want to see it, guys? Actually, it's not a new handbag. It's a new tote bag. Check it out. What do you think? Is it on theme? That's my new tote bag. I am a sucker for a tote bag. I wish they had it in tan. Everyone's going to understand it, laugh a bit, and think it's cool at the same time. That sounds great, MLH. I really like that. I really like that. Thank you, Red. Awfully pink. It is awfully pink. It's even a little more pink than I would have preferred. It's not the shade I would have. It's not the shade I would have loved, but it's an inexpensive tote bag. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, let's see where we are. We're at the summary. So we got a bunch of bullet points, guys. We're just going to run down all these bullet points and then hit the chapter and see what that does us. Language ideologies are the ways that language is valued, with one linguistic form or code considered better or worse than another. Ideologies usually remain unconscious. They serve the interests of social groups. Prevalent ideologies serve the elite, legitimating domination while disguising it from ordinary people. In the process of ideologies, iconization takes a language, variety, or feature as representative Oh, Chica. I am sorry. Crossbody purse that could carry everything without being massive. But a roll of toilet paper is a lot. That's a lot. Your 8-year-old granddaughter thinks she's 16. Yeah, they grow up fast. My daughter wears things to school that my mother would have. Let's just say when you have 2 generations of children, it's very strange. Things get a little strange when you have 2 generations of children. In the process of ideologies, iconization takes a language, variety, or feature as representative of a group. Recursion projects a distinction made at one level onto another level. Erasure renders facts which do not fit the ideology invisible. The social psychology of language focuses particularly on language attitudes, sometimes asking directly about language. Most studies involve playing recordings to a panel of judges who usually rate the standard language high for status and the non-standard high for solidarity. The matched guise technique was developed in Quebec, where listeners heard bilinguals without knowing they were the same speakers in both French and English. French and English listeners rated both English voices more. French and English listeners both rated English voices more favorably. Perceptual dialectology is the study of what lay people say about language. It's in mapping tasks, it is the salient dialect areas that people downgrade for incorrect English. Labov played listeners' recordings and compared their ratings of the same speakers using different variants. The more that informants produced a stigmatized feature themselves, the more sensitive they were to hearing it. Campbell Kibler found Southerners were heard as less educated by using in, but ing made a man sound more gay. Perceptions of ing differed widely, with contrasting reactions depending whether speakers' self-presentation rang true or not. That's why you think French and English listeners both rated English voices more favorably, Cubana? The processes by which linguistic forms accrue social meaning have been modeled in 5 phases and theorized as social indexicality. The indexical cycle begins with the social differentiation of a group, which leads to their linguistic differentiation via variables which are indicators or first-order indexicals. Yeah, we're over my head. Then on to social evaluation of the variables and their co-occurrence style variation as markers or second-order indexicals, and sometimes to stereotyping and third-order indexicality. You like the totes, Susan? Thank you. The standard language is a product of ideology. For French, standards are benchmarked by the Académie Française. Bourdieu's theory of linguistic capital holds that standardization devalues all other codes, with education as its main instrument. Standardization proceeds in 4 stages: selection, codification, elaboration, and acceptance. Yeah, I'm not sure about indexicals either. That's why we're reading the summary first. They'll explain it. Received pronunciation has been enregistered as the standard accent of Britain, with newspapers as its embodiment. What she does while she's in Canada, Mexican long hair. Not speaking the standard is a socioeconomic disadvantage, but local vernaculars indexing opposing values are maintained through shared networks and practices. D and restandardization are becoming evident in Europe and elsewhere. Backton maintained that language is pulled between centrifugal forces, which create diversity, and hegemonic centripetal forces, which standardize. The centrifugal forces lead to heteroglossia, linguistic variety on all dimensions. These are illustrated in two voices of a New Zealand comedian. First is the icon of Maori vernacular English, and then producing RP. Backton's concepts are reflected in the theories of the standing of English. One framework pictures nations on three concentric circles of English use, while in the center and periphery model, English is appropriated into local contexts. Dusty, how you doing, man? You guys, I'm going to go live with Dusty on Thursday night. I am really excited. It sounds like a lot of fun. Rechargeable generator? Wow. Hungarian speakers in Romania believe their speech is inferior to that spoken in Hungary. Lovely, Dusty. Lovely. 7 o'clock our time, Red. 7 o'clock our time. In a Disney animation, the villains speak. That's 10 o'clock your time, right, Dusty? 7 o'clock my time? The villains speak in foreign accented English. In countless countries, children have been punished for speaking their home language at school. All of these are the fruits of language ideologies, of the ways in which language is valued. Okay, good. Wanted to make sure. They represent the ideas, beliefs, and feelings of people about the varieties and languages involved. That one linguistic form or code sounds more beautiful or more ugly or superior or inferior or more or less moral, in short, is on some dimension better or worse than another. Oh, MLH. Is that enough gas money, man? I hate getting that tight, MLH. I hate getting that tight. The valuing of language has been an aspect of almost every topic we've covered in this book. We now turn to concentrate directly on the valuing of language, which affects all linguistic levels, from micro choices to contestation of what even counts as a language. A number of disciplines and methods. Excellent. Excellent, MLH. A number of disciplines, and yeah, my husband he had to get a new car because his got hit and it was old enough. He got hit right on the corner of it. See, the cough's not totally gone, but isn't it better, you guys? It's so much better. Oh my goodness, this cold has been just nothing but misery. My husband bought a new car, and he bought a hybrid Ford exposition. Hi, Lori. Yes, I am happy I'm feeling better too, MLH. It was not a fun cold. I've been sick over a week. Not good. A number of disciplines and methods have approached this field, each in its own way, and I cover these one by one. Work on language ideologies is qualitative and derives from approaches in current anthropology. Language attitude research comes out of social psychology and has been largely questionnaire-based and quantitative. Perceptual dialectology is part of variationist sociolinguistics, using techniques from geography. These are very different traditions with different goals, methods, and terminologies. Well, I want to get this read first. I tell you, the cough on top of the cough has been pretty severe. I've had to make myself not cough so I could breathe with this cold. The chapter then turns to examine how individual linguistic variables are evaluated and the ways in which language standards operate in society. Linguistic ideologies sometimes surface in open debates about language, but more often they remain unspoken and unconscious. While they may have major social and political effects, from individual discrimination through to armed conflict, most of the time people are scarcely aware of their existence. These ideologies are naturalized. They represent common sense views of language and society that people take for granted. They need no justification. They just describe the way the world is. But while self-presenting as neutral descriptions, ideologies have repercussions which are far from unaligned. It does, MLH. Ideologies become visible when they are brought out in the open by some salient event. I noted in Chapter 8 that sign languages have often been stigmatized. In 1988, Dr. Elizabeth Zinser was appointed president of Guadalajara, the Deaf University in Washington, D.C. Protests broke out, and she was forced to resign because she knew no American Sign Language and deaf community did not want that. Oh, I see. I noted in Chapter 8 that sign languages have been stigmatized. In 1988, Dr. Elizabeth Zinser was appointed president of Guadalajara, the Deaf University in Washington, D.C. Protests broke out and she was forced to resign because she knew no American Sign Language, and the deaf community did not want that. Her ignorance of American Sign Language symbolized her lack of involvement in the American deaf community. Her later statement that members of the university's board should learn a little sign, just a few basic phrases, some warm sentences when they meet people around the school, indicated awareness of the socio-symbolic value of American Sign Language, but did not help her case. For the community, knowledge of American Sign Language was a core value for membership. No, it is not universal. Interest in the ideological loading of language goes back to Himes, but it flourished during the 1990s. It was focused in programmatic articles by Woolard in 98 and Irvine and Gall in 2000. Woolard identifies several features. Ideologies serve the interests of social groups and are differentiated according to those interests. As Irvine and Gall observe, there is no view from nowhere, no gaze that is not positioned. 2. Prevalent ideologies serve the interests of the social elite. They legitimate and sustain subordination. Where most approaches can agree on the neutral description of ideology under point 1, not all cross the divide to accept point 2, a critical take that ideologies are about power. 3. Such ideologies disguise the operation of domination from the non-elite groups. Mexican long hair, it's not too late. You're younger than I am. I bet. I bet you're younger than I am. Irvine and Gall, Processes of Language Ideology. Irvine and Gall proposed an approach which explicates how people routinely define themselves over against some real or imagined other through 3 main processes. Iconization. I understand, MLH. I had the same problem for many, many years. I tell you what, though, with life experience, it is much easier to get through those classes. That sure is much easier to get through the bachelor's level classes than it seemed when I went the first time when I was 18. Iconization is the way linguistic feature, or even a whole variety of language becomes representative of a particular group. Although the association between the linguistic feature and the group is arbitrary, the feature is treated as somehow having a natural and inherent link within the group. In the Hebrew story of Shibboleth, this iconization became a matter of life or death. I think you have found your calling, MLH. The Hebrew word shibboleth has been taken into English to mean precisely a language feature which identifies a group. Iconization. It derives from an Old Testament story where the inability to pronounce sh, not s, was fatal. After defeating the tribe of Ephraim in battle, the Gileadites waited for the fleeing Ephraimites at the river Jordan. Whenever one of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me go over," the men of Gilead would say to him, "Are you an Ephraimite?" When he said no, they said to him, "Then say Shibboleth." And he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it right. And they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. Book of Judges, chapter 12, New Revised Standard Version. Interesting. Questions. Is there one main linguistic feature that people especially distinguishes your variety from others? Is there one particular other group that this feature distinguishes your group from? How is their variant for the iconic feature? How long has this feature operated as an icon between the two groups? How and why did the difference achieve its status? Are there linguistic reasons why this feature has been so salient? What are the social reasons? What other linguistic differences are being erased through the concentration on this icon? Adios, chica. It's really good to see you. Really good to see you. I'm so glad you're having a great time. Nope, schooling does not define us. Absolutely not. So that's iconization. You guys got that? Recursion involves the projection of a distinction made at one level onto another level. Irvine and Gall use the precise but opaque geometrical term fractal recursivity. In 19th century southeastern Europe, Macedonia was multi-ethnic and multilingual to a degree that bewildered Western European observers. Still more puzzling, this national level diversity was often reproduced recursively within families. Each son might be sent to a different school, Bulgarian, Greek, Romanian, Serbian, and emerge adopting its language and nationality. Very, very interesting. I would like another example than one like that, though. Good, MLH. Erasure is the process by which facts which do not fit the Erasure is the process by which facts which do not fit the ideology are rendered invisible. They are overlooked or explained away. Even a language that is as highly standardized as French encompasses a large range of variety that is ignored in defining what the standard is. Yet standard French is not regarded as one variety among others. Rather, it excludes the idea that variety even exists. Okay, so that is the three processes of language ideology: iconization, recursion, and erasure. Yeah, but I'm talking about how the dialects are valued. Exactly. Robert, hi. Colonial language ideologies. Colonial situations often make the workings of language ideology more visible because differentials in power are so obvious. No linguistic ideology is more basic than that of defining what does and does not count as a language, a process that went on throughout Africa in the 19th century. French military expeditions traversed the territory of Senegal, mapping the boundaries of groups and their languages. Iconization. The three main languages were interpreted as having essential characteristics. Fula was seen as a delicate language in its speakers and as intelligent. Wolof was less so, and its speakers were less intelligent. Serer was held to be a simple language, despite a notably complex morphology, and its speakers primitive. Groups were assumed to be monolingual, but clean boundaries could only be mapped by ignoring the prevailing multilingualism. Erasure. The imperial payoff for such idealizations was that the territories and their peoples were identified, segmented, and ready for governance. Exactly, MLH. It is exactly that. Rika, how you doing, girl? It is, as Irvine and Gall observe, easier to recognize, critique, and even ridicule these ideologies at a distance. But similar colonial, post-colonial, and quasi-colonial ideologies and their fruits remain alive and well today. The requirement to speak fluent English, not Swahili, to win a national beauty contest in Tanzania. The oppression of the Oroquen language of northeastern China under colonization by the Han Chinese and their language Mandarin. The triumph of Bahasa Indonesia as the national language of Indonesia at the expense of many local languages. Language with attitude. The social psychology of language has a very different take on language evaluation from the ideologies approach. Regional linguistics is really fascinating. Monday's chapter was on African American English. It was really interesting. Kat, I'm really happy you're starting to understand me because I don't understand me. Okay, so now the social psychology of language has a very different take on language evaluation from the ideologies approach. It majors on the role of language in intergroup and interpersonal relations particularly. It majors on the role of language in intergroup and interpersonal relations, particularly on attitudes, intergroup relations, particularly of different ethnicities and generations, stereotyping, accommodation between speakers, personality, persuasion, self-disclosure, deception, impression formation, and social problems such as aggression and prejudice. The research agenda and the methods here, largely experimental and quantitative, have been set by social psychologists rather than linguists, with the exception of a fruitful collaboration between Giles and the Kuplans. Asking about language. Yeah, they move all over the place, Amy. It's really interesting. The simplest way of doing language attitude research is to simply question people directly about their attitudes. In a study of the language of the Arvanites, ethnic Albanians who live in Greece, the researchers asked bluntly, "Do you like speaking Arvanitica?" Table 10.1 shows the results broken down by age. Interesting. Here's the numbers, guys. Do you see those? I lose me with the big old words sometimes, Kat. It's interesting statistics. alongside table 10.1b displays apparently contradictory attitudes to the role of language in community identity, and the questions below the table ask you to interpret this. Well, Kat, I get what you're saying. The problem with that is the definition of bilingual is very mushy. Some people say if I can say half a dozen words in Spanish, then I'm bilingual. And some people say if I can manage to communicate in the language, then I'm bilingual. Your vision's impaired at the moment. Okay, MLH. Man, one of these days I want to join you. One of these days when I'm done with class. Yes, but I'm not talking about people saying that. I'm just talking about the researchers. The researchers have different ideas on what bilingualism is. What does it actually mean? Where do you draw the line? When is somebody actual bilingual or not? It's a hard question. I and my colleagues also researched this identity issue in our surveys of Pacifica languages and their maintenance in New Zealand. Yeah, Kat. I mean, my Spanish is not pretty, but I could manage. If I found myself dropped alone in a Spanish-speaking country, I would be able to function. Whereas if I found myself dropped alone in an Arabic-speaking country, I would just be saying a lot of marhaba. We asked our Samoan respondents, do you have to speak Samoan to be a real Samoan? 19 out of 30 of them thought so. But when we asked Cook Islanders the parallel question about themselves, only 5 of the 30 agreed. The Cook Islands Maori language is more endangered than Samoan, with far fewer younger people speaking it. Cook Islands Maori is therefore rated as much less crucial to its community's identity than is the Samoan language in that community. Such attitude issues are central to the ethno-linguistic vitality approach we dealt with in chapters 2 and 3. Listener attitudes show through even when the stimulus to which they are responding is reduced to just a label. Coupland and Bishop analyzed the results of a BBC online survey of 5,000 British listeners reacting to accent names. The Queen's English and Standard English rated top for prestige, followed by Scottish, with some overseas accents such as New Zealand and North American rated high. The commonly denigrated British urban vernaculars rated bottom, led by Birmingham and followed by ethnically identified accents such as Asian and Afro-Caribbean. The findings indicate the persistence of entrenched British accent ideologies, the researcher concluded, although younger respondents were less negative about stigmatized varieties. Maori, yes, Amy. They often don't feel enough. They don't get enough Japanese. Yeah, that's a problem with being a third culture kid, Rika. It happens a lot. It happens a lot. It is an unpleasant thing. Rather than direct questioning, attitude researchers usually play recordings to a panel of judges and ask about their attitudes to the speakers. Yes, Amy, we are. This is the kind of thing we do all the time as listeners, most obviously on the phone. After hearing only a few seconds speech from a stranger, we will have come to a number of conclusions about their characteristics: gender, approximate age, probable level of education, possible kind of occupation, and their likability. In research, listener judges are usually called on to rate speakers' traits on scales from positive to negative, often with a neutral point in the middle. Each point on the scale is scored and average ratings across a group of listeners calculated. The results tend to form two different clusters, one for status and one for solidarity variables. Status relates to social stratification, for example, education. Solidarity involves attributes like reliability and attractiveness. Usually, the standard majority language rates high on status, and often, but not always, a minority or non-standard code rates well for solidarity. The best way to understand these scales is to take part in an experiment using them. In this questionnaire, exercises 10.4 and 10.5, there is just one question directly about language, accent pleasantness, and the rest ask for judgment about the speakers. But a study of regional attitudes to regional dialects of Dutch found listeners registered direct responses to the accents as well as to their speakers. The matched guys. Quebec has been a leading locale for research on attitudes to different languages in a bilingual situation, pioneered by the social psychologist Wallace Lambert. His interest was piqued by conversations overheard on a bus in Montreal circa 1960. Behind him were two women conversing in French. In front, two other women were commenting unfavorably in English on the French conversation, which they could not understand, and exchanging stereotypes about French Canadians. Well, you can't expect much else from them. That was a quote. Lambert developed the ingenious matched guys technique, in which listeners are played both French and English voices, but are unaware that the speakers are bilinguals whom they are hearing twice, once in each language. Any difference in a listener's judgment between the same speakers and their English guise versus their French guise represents a bias towards or against French or English. In Lambert's original experiment, French-speaking and English-speaking students rated voices produced by 4 bilinguals. The English speakers evaluated the English voices more favorably, but so also, to the researchers' surprise, did the French-speaking students. Still more surprisingly, the French group judged French voices less favorably than did the English-speaking group. The researchers concluded that the French speakers had internalized a negative stereotype of their own language. That was more than half a century ago, and a vast amount of socio-political change has flowed through Quebec in the interim, especially for the status of the French language. Despite this, subsequent replications, including the only recent one that I know of, found precisely the same kind of self-denigration, an issue we return to in section 10.5. In attitudes experiments, Quebecois have also long downgraded their own speech compared with continental French. But this they have had in common with many post-colonial varieties of English and Spanish. Variations on the matched guise continue to be used widely in language attitude research on dozens of language. MLH is in Denver. He knows from winter. Perceptual dialectology. Championed by American sociolinguist Dennis Preston, perceptual dialectology is the study of what lay people say about language. He and his colleagues have found there is little common ground between folk and linguist beliefs of what language is. Linguists may be descriptivists, but everyone else is prescriptivist, a stance that sociolinguists struggle with in their dealings with other people. Correctness dominates folk views. Yeah, it'd be beautiful in the summer. I'm sorry, Lori. Rika, will you keep an eye on her stream and let me know if I need to bop in there for any moderating? I wanted I had to study, and I don't know if she's got another moderator in there since Fluffer's not around. Correctness dominates folk views. People equate language with the standard language, and everything else is a deviation resulting from speakers' laziness or recalcitrance. Figure 10.1. I know, Rika, that's what I figured out. Figure 10.1 shows how a sample of respondents from Michigan rated the states of U.S. for the correctness of their English. Hey, Sunrise Dawn. Okay. Michiganders' ratings of correctness of English in the continental U.S. on a 10-point scale. Higher numbers are better. Okay, Rika, thank you. Much perceptual dialectology research has relied on people mapping dialects and their perceptions of them. One advantage of this method is that people generate their own labels rather than having to fit to the preset terms of a questionnaire. The maps are littered with comments such as Southern Hicks, Hillbilly, Snobs, Damn Yankees, Midwest Drawl. Well, these were Michiganders who were assessing the accent. So they would have been hearing accents everywhere else. One state, the Upper Peninsula. It's kind of interesting, huh? Forgot to clean off the camera again, y'all. I'm sorry. Okay. Much perceptual dialectology research. Now, keep in mind that's from the perception of the Michiganders. So, if you did it from the perception of the Californians, you'd have a completely different map. Much perceptual dialectology research has relied on people mapping dialects and their perceptions of them. One advantage of this method is that people generate their own labels rather than having to fit to the set terms of a questionnaire. Damn Yankees, Midwest Drawl. The most salient dialect areas turn out to be the ones that Americans downgrade for incorrect English, namely the South and New York City. The other main dimension of comment is the pleasantness of accents, and here the denigrated dialects do rather better. The linguistic characteristic of dialects are labeled in terms such as nasal, twang, drawl, and especially good, bad. Evaluating individual linguistic variables. So far, we have dealt with the valuing of languages and dialects as if they were wholes. But the native listeners do not only or even primarily respond to entire linguistic codes, but to the specific forms which make up those codes, that is, the sounds and structures of language. As in so much else, Leibov was the pioneer of the study of listeners' evaluations of individual sociolinguistic variables in his New York City study. In addition to recording his informant's language production, you guys remember that cool study he did in New York? In addition to his recording his informant's language production, he tested their perceptions by playing them recordings of other New York speakers and asking them to rank the speakers for the highest job they were suited to hold. Different sections of the recording were scripted to concentrate examples of the 5 phonological variables that Leibov was researching. The recordings were matched guises. That is, the listeners heard the same speakers both with and without the target variables in their speech. The differences in how the listeners rated each speaker's job chances between their two individual guises indicated their responses to the specific linguistic variables. You following, guys? I think that made sense. The findings were not predictable. The more that informants, if you ask Sunrise Dawn, they do. Everybody has an accent, y'all. Everybody has an accent. It's just you don't think it's an accent because everybody speaks the same. Exactly. Ask Sunrise and Susan. We totally have accents, don't we, Susan? Y'all are the ones without accents. So the findings were not predictable. The more that informants produced a stigmatized feature in their own speech, the more sensitive they were to hearing it. This involved the lower middle class crossover for R, as well as exceeding the upper middle class in the production of R. The lower middle class also surpassed it in the sensitivity of their perceptions of R. As an incoming change, the production of R is differentiated between age groups, and so also is its evaluation. All adults under 40 register sensitivity to the presence of R in speech, but only half of those over 40. This pattern linking evaluation with use has also shown elsewhere. Avant-garde Dutch, which is typified by the lowering of the I diphthong, is the variety used by elite young women in the Netherlands. They also turn out to be the ones who rate it favorably in perception tests. Floridians have an accent. That's right, Rika. You grew up in the South, didn't you? Mm-hmm. But when you say they don't have an accent, you have to consider what are you measuring against for them to have an accent. And you're measuring against some imagined version of standardized English. Responding to ing. The most sophisticated research on perceptions of linguistic variables brings us back to the subject of our Chapter 7 case study, the variable ing. Catherine Campbell Kibler digitally spliced in-ing alternatives into otherwise identical recordings of the same speakers to create matched guises differing only in their ing realizations. I think there's a Northwest accent, and I think it's similar enough to California and Minnesota for really this map is only showing 3 or 4 accents. I think that map's kind of showing what you're saying, Rika. Exactly, Sunrise Dawn. You grew up hearing it. So Ms. Kibler digitally spliced in and ing alternatives into otherwise identical recordings of the same speakers to create matched guises differing only in their ing realizations. Gathering listener attitudes through group interviews and a web survey, she found that the responses reflected a range of social characteristics, especially region, gender, sexuality, and class. The American South is the one U.S. dialect region where in predominates over ing. Campbell Kibler's listeners heard the Southern speakers as being even more Southern when they used in rather than ing. The listeners associated the Southerners' speech with being country and less educated, calling up this set of stereotypes. Tamika, maybe a redneck? Possibly. That's such a bad term. Abby, no, it's not. Perfectly acceptable to call someone a redneck, but he likes his football and tailgating. Mary, and whiskey? Abby, and whiskey? Yeah, he's a redneck. Wow, Sunrise Dawn. That's a lot of accent. Tennessee and Kentucky are different. So are Michigan and Boston. On the other hand, nearly twice as many of the listeners described one speaker as gay when he was using ing rather than in, and heard him as sounding less masculine and more urban. Recall that in had salient gendered associations in the studies by Fisher Trudgill and especially Kiesling in chapter 7.6. In perception as well as in production, in indexes masculinity, physicality, and ruralness. By contrast, ing is heard as educated and intelligent. But the picture is by no means so simple as Campbell Kibler makes it clear elsewhere. Some of her speakers triggered contrasting reactions from their listeners. They agreed with each other on how the speakers sounded, but disagreed on whether those self-presentations rang true or not. The use of in by Elizabeth was heard as either compassionate or condescending, depending on what stance the particular listener attributed to her. Valerie, in her ing guise, was heard as intelligent by some, but a quarter of the listeners thought she was unintelligent and trying to impress. If a speaker was heard as trying to do something intentionally rather than naturally, listeners tended to disallow the claim and give the speaker the opposite grading. You're walking and talking? I think I use ing. This variability between listeners shows the need to question Leibov's assumption that evaluations are shared across a speech community. It recalls Rickford's study of class in Quinault, Guyana. Language evaluations and attitudes there were contrary rather than consensual, reflexes of the class conflict within the community. Campbell Kibler concludes that even a single variable like ing, which is the subject of overt comment and has its own recognized label, dropping your G's, can call up multiple and contrasting social meanings. Oh, you back, Dusty? That's great. How's Mom? Really, Kat? Where are you from, Kat? Hearing vowel shifts. Sound change presents a challenge to perception and understanding. How do listeners cope with vowels that are shifting, especially if those listeners come from other dialect areas that are not undergoing the changes. Usually, local listeners prove, not surprisingly, to be better at hearing local distinctions than are people from elsewhere. The northern city's change shift has been fertile ground for investigating this. Preston researched perceptions in Michigan and found that listeners whose dialect is most involved in the shift comprehend best, and those who are least involved comprehend worst. As the title of Preston's article has it, outsiders would think they heard this nonsense sentence. Belle's body just caught the fit gnat. Belle's body just caught the fit gnat. But what the change-shifting Michigander really said was, Bill's body just cut the fat knot. Belle's body, Bill's body, Belle's body, Bill's body just cut the fat knot. Bill's body just cut the fat knot. But what they hear is, Belle's body just caught the fit gnat. The ability to digitally synthesize vowels very precisely along a phonetic continuum means that sociophoneticians are now able to test perceptions of finely graded pronunciation differences. Listeners from Detroit, which is participating in the change shift, are sensitive to the shifted vowels, but those who are in northern Michigan, remote from the shift, are not. Frequent exposure to the incoming pronunciations looks to be crucial to perceiving them. Your cousins want your mom to move back to California? What does your mom want? I mean, I guess it's what your mom wants, right? The paradox of near mergers. The most surprising, well, let's go back up to these exercise. Okay. Evaluating Valerie. In Campbell Kibler's studies of ing perceptions, some listeners questioned how intelligent one of the speakers really was. This is what Valerie had said in the recording they heard. To get a major in history, you have to have taken classes from all different time periods, all different areas, everything like that. And that means you're getting breadth. You're basically starting from the beginning every time. You know, you move to a different part of the world, you're starting from scratch. Here is what two of the focus groups who listened to that said about her. Probably not so smart because she's saying the obvious. Or maybe in a situation where she's not comfortable, so she kind of just says whatever comes to mind. Yeah, I agree. It sounded like she really didn't know what to say and just kind of spat something out. Yeah, it's definitely like I get the impression that she's not doing well in history. And another one, Jiminy Christmas Red. It is 65 degrees and rainy here. Well, even if she does have a degree, I don't think it was very rigorous. Anything in particular that gave you that impression? Oh, it was just that she stammered after she was talking about the different types of majors, and it was just kind of disjointed. Yeah, I don't think she's very smart. Interesting. You worry about her driving in California? Does she think she can drive? The paradox of near mergers. The most surprising finding on the perception of linguistic variables is the existence of near mergers. Ugh, it's dusty, yuck. Merger occurs when two vowels come to occupy the same space. It turns out that some pronunciations can be so nearly merged that they are heard as the same, even though acoustic measurements show them to be consistently, if slightly, different. Yeah, dry heat is much better. Dry heat is much better. That is, speakers can produce a difference that they cannot hear. It seems that perception does not always align perfectly with production, although that has always been a tenet of linguistic theory. Good, Dusty. Good. Several near mergers have been found in dialects of both American and British English, as well as Swedish. The most studied is between pairs like Mary and Murray in Philadelphia English. Some Philadelphians show a complete merger, some a clear distinction, but others have a near merger. Labov designed the Coach test to study discrimination of these two vowels. You're getting hail, Lori? That is not fun. That is not fun. Labov created an ingenious naturalistic experiment to test Philadelphians' perceptions of the near merger in words like fairy and furry, while listeners were concentrating away from actual language. He scripted a narrative about the coach of a high school basketball team, focusing on a boy named Murray and a girl nicknamed Marion. At the crucial stage of the deciding game, the coach has to decide which one of them to put in as a substitute fielder. He debates with himself and makes his decision. I gotta play Mary in there. I gotta play Murray in there. I gotta play Mary in there. I gotta play Murray in there. The narrator, yeah, Kat, I figured you did. The narrator recorded both phonetic versions, and the denouement of the story was written ambiguously so that it would suit either decision. Subjects hear one of the versions and are asked whether the coach made the right decision. The ensuing conversation shows whether they have interpreted the decision as favoring the boy or the girl, and therefore indicates how they perceived the near merged vowels. In a 1988 run of the experiment, 14 out of 15 outsiders gave the correct response on which version they had heard, but 7 out of 21 Philadelphians were wrong, indicating they did not perceive the vowel distinction. The indexical cycle. We're back to indexical, you guys. One of y'all was wondering what indexical meant. How are we coming on this chapter? We're coming, but we're not coming quickly enough. The previous section largely begged a foundational question, the answer to which is crucial to our approach in the rest of the book. We have seen how languages and varieties are infused with ideologies, how listeners react to those codes in attitude studies, and how they respond to individual linguistic forms. We have covered what, but not yet attempted to address the sociolinguistic why and how and who of this. Why do linguistic forms accrue social meaning? How do they do so? And who is responsible? Paolo, hi. Okay, guys, so this says, in the first step, the group establishes its own identity evaluated by self and others. And then the group differentiates itself linguistically from others. And then the group's language is evaluated by self and others, and others shift relative to the group's language. And then that language becomes the object of overt comment. It's good to see you, Paolo. The first address to this central issue came not within sociolinguistics or even in the West, but from the Russian literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin, whose approach we deal with in the case study in 10.6. We're not at 10.6 yet. Sociolinguistic founders. No, we did do 10.6. Oh, okay. Sociolinguistic founders such as Ferguson and Gumpers tackled the issue in the 50s and Leibov from the 60s. My own attempt began during doctoral work in the 70s and formed the foundation of audience design theory. I proposed a model for understanding how language and linguistic variables take on social meaning, shown in expanded version in figure 10.2 as the indexical cycle. In some languages, cat, the double letters are longer. So kit with one letter, with one T, it would be kitten. And with two T's, it would be kitten. So that's an indicator in some languages. Where do they get worse from wash? The vowel switch. That's phonetics, guys. I suck at phonetics. I don't know where they get worse from wash. It's a vowel shift. So as you shift one vowel as you shift how you say one vowel, all the rest of the vowels need to change. So That's what they meant when they said the northern cities vowel chain shift. There is, every time you shift a vowel, all the others have to then follow along, and it just clicks down this cue. I will see if I can find, let me see. Let me write these down. Hold on, you guys. Yes, 1T would be a long I sound. Yes, Kat. Baltimore. It is a little bit different. Okay. Meanwhile, the linguistic anthropologist Michael Silverstein was beginning to theorize the process in a more sophisticated fashion in terms of indexicality. Most people would say you're just pronouncing both at once. That's the way I always understood it in English, is you're just pronouncing both at once. But sometimes you do get distinctions, I have heard, in some words, none of which are coming to mind right now. Michael Silverstein was beginning to theorize the process in a more sophisticated fashion in terms of indexicality, which he proposed has 3 orders. An index is a sign that bears a direct connection to what it refers to. Thunder is indexical of lightning. In language, a form indexes social values, connecting language, form, and social meaning. Just like iconization. These approaches share a lot in common. Identify in figure 10.2.1, identify 5 phases which make up the indexical cycle and illustrate them through a case we are already familiar with, Eckert's Belton High. The numbering meshes with Silverstein's 3 orders of indexicality. 0. Kitten. 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 It's a kitten. I'm going to have to ask about that one, Kat. I'm going to have to ask about that one. I think that would fall to regional variation. So, 0 indexing. A group or individual achieves a distinct identity valued by group members, contrastive with, and evaluated by others. point. Assume an idealized point of origin for jocks and burnouts in the past. Both groups begin to take on their own social practices and characteristics. They are socially differentiated and evaluated. 1. The group distinguishes aspects of its language from others, either as part of the founding process or subsequently. This produces interspeaker variational differences between the speech of the group and of others. Labov termed this social variation and labeled linguistic forms which manifested such interspeaker difference as indicators. For Silverstein, this is first order indexicality, the initial step in the registration of social meaning. See you later, sunrise, dawn. Jocks and burnouts differentiate their language from each other, for example, using more or less negative concord. Both the group and the outsiders put a social value on the group's language and its forms. The linguistic variables take on social meanings in line with how the user group is evaluated, as we saw in the previous section for ing and postvocalic R. For the Belton High community, negative concord attracts the evaluations associated with its user group, the burnout. The form begins to mean what the group means. Simultaneously, outsiders start to adopt these features to signal would-be affiliation with the group and its values. This creates intraspeaker variation, that is, individuals whose speech ranges across both their original repertoire and the newly adopted variants. This is style. Labov termed such linguistic variables markers, and Silverstein second-order indexes. Belton High in-betweens who want to associate with the burnouts may start to use negative concord. The form has begun to stand for affiliation within the group. 3. Some linguistic variables may become the object of overt attention and comment. These are shibboleths, by which a linguistic form is consciously used to do social work. Labov termed these stereotypes, and Silverstein third-order indexes. Negative concord is openly identified as a stereotype of burnout speech. It may be performed as an emblem of the group, affiliating or critiquing or satirizing. Understanding indexicality. My attempt in figure 10.2 to formalize the making of a sociolinguistic meaning is, like any other, inevitably idealized and under-nuanced. It reifies concepts like identity and group, chronologically orders phases which are simultaneous or interspersed or recursive, makes the variable discrete and the relative absolute, and implies that all of a group's variables index the same social meaning. Modeling such as the indexical cycle is, however, still worth attempting, and we can draw a number of generalizations from it. Kid Freshie, how are you doing? You cannot read a second-order social meaning off a first-order distribution. The existence of statistical differences between ages or classes does not itself demonstrate that the variable has social meaning, as some variationist work has assumed. You need independent social evidence. The stylistic derives from and mirrors social differentiation. You do not get interspeaker style difference without the pre-existence of interspeaker differences. First order indexicality is the prerequisite for second order. Phases 2A and 2B always co-occur. The empirical evidence, for example, from Leibov's early work, is that once a linguistic variable starts to be evaluated, it necessarily becomes the subject of style shift. Most variables are markers, second-order indexicals, evaluated and subject to styling. Few stay arrested at the level of indicators, with the second-order potential only lurking ready to endow social meaning. A few variables proceed to phase 3 to become overtly manipulated shibboleths. Really, kid, that's pretty funny. This model is a way of schematizing how linguistic differences have been created between groups, that is, how styles evolve. It also shows the process by which an individual learns to style, and it can continue to cycle to new variables. Note the recursive arrows from 2B3 back to phase 1. The most thorough research into indexicality and registerment of a dialect that it embodies has been by Barbara Johnstone and her colleagues in Pittsburgh. They trace the Pittsburgh dialect through all three indexical orders, from historical differentiation through evaluation and styling to stereotype performance. First labeled in print as Pittsburghese in 1967, it is now commodified on t-shirts, performed in radio skits, and prescribed in a published guide on how to speak like a Pittsburgher. Monophthongization of the diphthong in mouth is now well established as a Pittsburgh shibboleth. Phase 3 in figure 10.2. Often such a variant will be displayed in a stock lexical item, perhaps respelt. In this case, downtown for downtown. Recall Rex O'Neill's recitation displaying the Ocracoke hoitoid vowel. Downtown. Eckert proposes the indexical field as a way of mapping the range of a variable's social meanings in the belief that a variable need not be tied to a single significance. She takes the variety of associations that Ing called up for the subjects in Campbell-Kibler's studies that we looked at earlier, then diagrams them as in figure 10.3. For individual hearers, the two variants ing and in need not index direct opposites. Johnstone and Kiesling has found that the mouth diphthong had a very different meanings for different people, often unpredictable from the person's demographics. In particular, a speaker may have a different social meaning for a variable than the listener takes from it. That said, it is clear from figure 10.2 that a variable such as ing does carry a core set of social meanings. So the Roman type represents the ing variant, and the italics the in variant. The most obvious product of language ideology is the standard language. Although people focus a lot of attention on the forms of the standard language, it is essentially a social rather than a linguistic construct. Standard languages are the outcome of processes outlined in the first and third sections of this chapter. Recall that the main characteristics of an ideology are that it serves the interests of the social group. Standard languages are defined by and serve social elites, legitimizing linguistic domination and concealing it from the dominated. French is perhaps the world's most standardized language, benchmarked in the 17th century by the founding of the Académie Française. After the French Revolution, language unification became more extreme, downgrading all other languages such as Breton and Occitan and all varieties other than the French of the Ile-de-France, the area around Paris. That history makes it no surprise that French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu should be the one to theorize language standardization. In society, there are different kinds and levels of symbolic or cultural capital, including linguistic capital. Language standardization unifies the linguistic market and necessarily devalues all other codes. Speakers not brought up with legitimate language are put at an automatic disadvantage in situations where the standard is expected, such as formal social occasions. If their discourse is to be listened to as well as heard, they must adopt legitimate language, but this they cannot achieve easily. The outcome is a form of symbolic violence which leads to the hypercorrective behavior of the petit bourgeois as discovered by Labov in New York and observed by Bourdieu in France. Labov calculated an index of linguistic insecurity for his New Yorkers, the difference between their own usage and what they thought was correct. The lower middle class were by far the most self-denigrating, leading Labov to characterize New York famously as a sink of negative prestige. The study of language standardization goes back to the earliest days of sociolinguistics, when language planning was a major activity. The Norwegian-American Einar Hagen proposed that standardization consisted of 4 stages: selection of a language or variety to be standard, codification of the linguistic characteristics of the standard, elaboration, the promotion of the standard across social functions and domains, acceptance, the implementation and diffusion of the standard throughout society. Hagen's model shares with all descriptivist approaches the tendency to erase the ideological position that it encodes, and therefore meshes with the consensus approach to social structure. In keeping with the conflict model described in Chapter 7.2, the Milroys regard standardization as an ideology and a process, and the standard as an idea rather than a product. Received pronunciation is the world's best-known standard accent, but it is a relatively recent invention resulting from social processes and partaking in continuing linguistic change. Although the label implies historic authority, Until the mid-18th century, there was no sense of standard pronunciation for English. But 100 years later, RP had been established as the elite accent of England. It had gone from first to second order status on the indexical cycle. The main instrument of language standardization is the education system, which routinely promotes monolingualism and monodialectalism. Bourdieu maintains that teachers, grammarians, and writers construct legitimate language, which has to be sustained by constant correction. In the UK, John Honey conflates standard English with educatedness and social betterment, learning the standard with the ability to gain technological literacy, and regards linguists as among the enemies of the standard. He proposed the establishment of a French-style language academy in Britain. Lippy Green's work on language ideology and discrimination in the United States identifies a range of educational practices that marginalize non-standard English in the classroom. The enregistrement of received pronunciation. Asif Agha investigated the process of enregistrement by which a minority accent from southeastern England became the national standard of British English. His term covers phrases 2 to 3 of the indexical cycle in figure 10.2, moving from first to second to third order indexicality. The prerequisite for enregistrement of received pronunciation was for it to be circulated ever more widely in society. This began about 1760 with the proliferation of prescriptivist works on pronunciation, which led to popular handbooks on correct speech. 19th century novelists picked up features into their character speech. Dickens' Uriah Heep became the icon of denigrated H-dropping, a stereotype emblematized in the single repeated word, umble. Finally, penny weeklies with huge circulations spread the discourse of good speech down the social scale. RP thus became widely perceived as socially desirable speech, and by the late 19th century, the English public schools became nurseries for producing its speakers. Increasingly, received pronunciation was identified with what Agha terms particular characterological figures. Initially, public school graduates served as these exemplary speakers, then army officers, and from the mid-20th century, BBC announcers. Today, RP consistently rates high on accent score evaluations in attitude studies. It is spoken by only a few percent of the population of the United Kingdom, but is precisely that scarcity that defines much of its worth. It would be devalued if too many people spoke it. Linguistic disadvantage. If speaking the standard is a social advantage, we'll see, guys, then lacking it must be necessarily a disadvantage. The unavoidable outcome of language standardization is inequity, certainly for some, often for the many. Well, if that's the case, we better close up shop without any Minnesota goodbyes today, y'all, and head over to Serge's channel and take a listen. I've only got about 6 more pages in this chapter. And yes, Thursday night, Just 48 hours from now, Dusty and Feral Cheryl and I will be doing a live together. I'm really excited. So, thank you guys. Thank you for spending my study time with me. Thank you for being there. Thank you for being all green. And I had a great time hanging out with y'all in the corner joint. I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye. Wolf! I just missed you. We'll see you later, Wolf. Gotta go. We'll see you at Surge's. Catch you there. Bye, y'all.